India as a country is largely tolerant. We value our beliefs, our languages and our diversity. But when it comes to people who are different from us, those with mental and physical disabilities, the us and them syndrome takes over. And that contradicts the very essence of diversity. Over the next half hour, we'll tell you how the disabled in our country are struggling to exist. With all the assertions about how India is shining, the condition of those living on the margins is a true reflection of a country's progress. With basic infrastructure and public transport inaccessible to most of the disabled, they're restricted to spending their time and their lives within the four walls of their house. The last official figure from the census in 2001 dictates that 2.1% or 21 million people in the country are disabled. But that, experts say, is a gross underestimation. The World Report on Disability published by the World Bank says that 15% of the world's population is affected by disability. By that measure, India should be home to 70 to 100 million people with disabilities. In 2010-2011, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment allocated roughly 4,000 crores and a measly 300 crores was spent on disability. Despite the huge population of disabled people in India, the government ends up spending only 0.09% of its GDP on disability. 30-year-old Savarna Raj won a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games in powerlifting and table tennis. That is an easy feat for her, but getting to work every day is a task she finds extremely difficult. We followed her as she tried to board the bus. None stopped for her. Undeterred, she opted for the metro, but couldn't even get onto the platform.
मुसीबतें तो बहुत आती है. कभी अकेले जाने की सोचे तो कहीं बस स्टॉप एक्सेसिबल नहीं है, हर जगह कहीं मेट्रो एक्सेसिबल नहीं है. हम अगर बस पकड़नी होती है तो हम बस से बिल्कुल चढ़ नहीं पाते जब तक हमें कोई पुश करके बस तक ना पहुंचा पाए. ऐसे ही मेट्रो स्टेशन पे इतनी सारी सीढ़ियाँ होती है, लिफ्ट कहीं और लगाई जाती है, जब वहाँ तक जाने में भी बहुत प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है हमें.
I'm standing at the foot-over bridge which has been constructed right next to Nehru Place. Now this foot-over bridge is on top of a very busy thoroughfare which connects one part of the road to the other side. Now you can see that this foot-over bridge is very amenable, very accessible for wheelchair users. It has a ramp which could be used by wheelchair users. But if we could just pan and show you the entry to this particular foot-over bridge. There are these barriers that have been constructed. Now this makes it very difficult for a wheelchair user to maneuver through these barriers, and that really makes it very discouraging for them to even use this. Now how would a wheelchair user then go from this side of the road to the other side of the road when there are no zebra crossings that have been made on the road itself?
The lack of accessible transport forces those disabled to rely on their family members to get to places. Malls, offices and public areas are constructed without keeping the needs of those disabled in mind. Unless equipped with a private customized vehicle, a luxury afforded by few, using public transport proves to be a nightmare.
Transport system is very difficult. It is completely inaccessible. Even the bus transport, in spite of, they have that little logo of accessible. You must have seen that sign, but that doesn't mean that they're really accessible. That's really shameful that they have that logo there, because those buses are not accessible at all.
While huge challenges confront the transport system, there are several curative measures that the government is trying to implement with the newer construction. While the old buses and metros are out of bounds for those physically disabled, studies to avoid a repetition of the mistakes are being undertaken.
Need to design a flyover, I need to consider what the requirement. The gradient is not suitable. So for that, even if I'm designing a subway, I need to consider the disabled persons, and that would mean I provide the slope edge smooth as possible.
Infrastructure sensitive to the needs of the disabled will empower them by making education and employment accessible to them, giving them a sense of self-respect. Despite a law that's been passed to this effect, there's a lot that's left to be desired.
With 80 million disabled people in India, the need of the hour is to make them independent. And the one surefire way is through sport. But disabled athletes allege massive corruption in disability sport.
Tarun had a bad accident a little over a year ago. He lost the ability to walk. Only 18 years of age. He had his whole life ahead of him. A year later, there was a noticeable shift in his level of confidence and a renewed hope for a better future. How? He was playing basketball with a bunch of others.
Sports have helped me a lot. It has helped me to build up stamina, to stronger my muscles, and to build up strength in my muscles. And moreover, sports have helped me in my daily routine also. Like it has helped me to improve my wheelchair skills and all. So, moreover, sports has also helped me to get away from the daily depression that I usually used to have earlier. So, sports have helped me a lot.
Like Tarun, several others who are either disabled or lose movement due to a disease or an accident turn to sports to pass time. Not only does it make them physically stronger, but also offers them thrill and excitement very few other activities do. But lack of sporting infrastructure in India for the disabled dampens their spirit, leaving a lot to be desired.
I think sports, first of all, people do not have the awareness that they have something called sports available after the disability, and there are not enough facilities available for people to have access to sports after disability, because after a person is injured, is on wheelchair, their needs differ from an able-bodied person. So the infrastructure which is in accordance with that has to be provided.
Rajiv Virat is a national level tennis player and is the only peer trainer for wheelchair skills in India. He stresses on the need for representation of disabled people in committees that formulate policies for people like him.
The problem is there's a huge gap between the policymakers and the actual user fraternity. What I think the policymakers don't know what's the actual need, and once a policy is being framed, we, the wheelchair users, the genuine users, are not part of it. The bus stops are made accessible, but I have never seen any wheelchair user right in front of the bus stop using it and giving it a feedback whether it's made good or bad.
India is not known for the facilities for its disabled, especially when it comes to sports. There's an urgent need for an overall attitude shift to rid the country of the segregation, discrimination, barriers and stereotypes. Although one can't deny that the government has taken some initiatives to make life a little easier for those disabled, but there's a key area that's largely been ignored, that of providing quality equipment like wheelchairs and crutches to those disabled, and that too at an affordable cost.
Almost about 15% of Indians have some impairment or disabling condition. Many of those impaired live on the streets of the country and depend on the government for key aid and assistance. At policy level, progressive legislation, schemes and provisions exist for them. But how good are these provisions that are doled out to men and women, especially those who cannot afford the modern ones available in the market?
इनमें गुटका वगैरह नहीं है, पुरानी हो गई हैं, गिर जाते हैं, तमाम प्रकार की परेशानियां होती हैं, गद्दी सद्दी फट जाती हैं, देखो इसलिए दिक्कत आती है तमाम प्रकार की जो समस्या तो आई है, लेकिन अब समस्या से निपटना पड़ता है। मुख्य बात ये है कि इतनी भी मजबूरियां हैं, जब देश के नागरिक हैं, देश में जो सब अपने हाथे पैसे से इतने पैसे वाले हैं नहीं जो खरीद सकें।
This man living outside the Lodi temple in the national capital echoes the thoughts of hundreds and thousands of Indians like him who expect the government to take care of one basic need, of providing facilities that will enable them to move around comfortably. But the equipment given to them under the Persons with Disabilities Act is obsolete and even risky for their use.
इसको दिक्कत होता है, इससे चढ़ाई पे चढ़ाना पड़ता है, इसको ब्रेक टूट जाता है, फिर ये हो जाता है, चैन उतर जाता है रास्ते में, चढ़ाई पे रास्ते में चैन उतर जाएगा तो वो आगे पीछे जाके गिरेगा, आगे तो नहीं जाएगा, इसको पीछे जाके गिर पड़ेगा। तो इसलिए इसका थोड़ा मॉडल दूसरा बना के देख दे, जो इसमें जो चैन उतरता है ये इनका सिस्टम खत्म हो जाए तो और भी अच्छी बात है।
Many of the differently abled in the country, like these men and women begging for alms in Delhi, are extremely poor. Today, modern facilities are available for those who can afford them. Modern wheelchairs, modern crutches that are safe, but for those depending on the government can only expect this.
Even today as we speak, 60 whatever years after independence, and so many years after the new law, and so many years after the ratification of the CRPD, there is one Alimco. There is that one factory or one institution where these aids and appliances are manufactured, as far as the government is concerned. And the less said about it, the better. I mean, you look at the quality of those crutches, you look at the quality of those artificial limbs, you look at the quality of those wheelchairs. I mean, I would not wish that upon the worst of my enemy, to be very honest with you.
Experts say that very little thought is actually put into manufacturing equipment for the disabled in the country. For example, this wheelchair here is completely obsolete and is actually risky for the person who's using it. But the question is, who is listening? For far too many years, we've ignored the disabled in our country, reducing them to dependence. A situation that's completely avoidable if they're empowered with the ability to commute. Now, after the break, we'll tell you how the war heroes and innocent civilians are virtually discarded after they're disabled. Keep watching India Disabled. They risk their lives, sacrifice the comfort of coming back home every night only to serve the nation. More often than not, they suffer from grievous injuries that leaves them physically disabled. Many war heroes claim that the government ignores their pleas for the payment of dues.
Sounds from that fated day still echo in his ears. Surinder Singh was serving as an NSG commando when terrorists attacked Mumbai. Risking his life, he was serving in Major Unnikrishan's cadre when a grenade exploded in his ear, leaving him deaf.
हमने अपना फर्ज पूरा निभाया, पर सरकार अपना फर्ज या दायित्व निभाने से हमारे को छोड़ दिया गया। इसमें मुझे मेडिकल इनफिट होने की वजह से सर्विस से घर भेज दिया गया है। मुझे उसका मलाल नहीं है, क्योंकि मैं देश के ऊपर बोझ बनकर नहीं बैठना चाहता। अगर मैं एक्टिवेट कार्रवाई नहीं कर सकता और मैं एक्चुअल इनफिट हूँ, तो वो मेरे को कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। परंतु अब मुझे 13 महीने से 1 रुपया भी पेंशन के तौर पर नहीं मिल रहा है।
The government's apathy becomes rather apparent towards war heroes when cases like these come to the fore. Forgotten and ignored, they feel like the nation's let them down and that their sacrifice was in vain. Arvind Kejriwal slammed the government for their callousness towards war heroes.
और जिन लोगों ने अपनी जान दांव पे लगाई, उसको शायद सब लोग भूल गए। उनमें 2 लोग मारे गए, 11 लोग बुरी तरह से जख्मी हुए, और वो आज तक अपने हक के लिए लड़ रहे हैं।
While the government has offered a rebuttal and attempted to defend itself, saying that his pension was sanctioned, careful scrutiny reveals that the pension was only released in November 2012, almost a year after he retired. It highlights the government and the Indian Army's brazen disregard of the plight of its disabled war heroes.
And it's not just soldiers and commandos who bear the brunt of the callousness of the system. More often than not, innocent civilians get caught in crossfire and suffer from serious injuries. But the government turns a blind eye to their pleas of help, showing no semblance of sympathy or a shred of care.
35-year-old Nazir Ahmed Sheikh was a famed mason known for his artistic work in North Kashmir's Kupwara district. He had dreamt of making it big in life, but fate had other plans for him. Picked up by some unidentified army personnel in 1994, Nazir woke up to the horror of amputated legs and 4 fingers in the Bone and Joint Hospital of Srinagar. Tortured and bruised, his life could only be saved at the cost of his limbs. For 17 years now, Nazir, rendered crippled, is fighting a seemingly unending battle for due compensation for a source of livelihood.
जो मेरे पास बगीचे थे वो वही उन्होंने बेच दिया, तो वो इलाज को मेरे को लगवा दिया। बाद में हर जगह, हर मनुष्य के पास, हर एमएलए के पास गए थे, मगर उन्होंने हमारे गौर नहीं किया था। तो बाद में उसके बाद उस वक्त गुलाम नबी आज़ाद साहब थे, और उसने मेरे साथ एक वादा किया था एक जलसगाह में, बोला जो भी होगा वो मैं आपको करवाऊंगा, कोई क्लास फोर्थ या कोई स्लीपर पोस्ट आपको दिलवा सकता हूँ। बाद में उन्होंने वो भी वादा पूरा नहीं किया था।
State Human Rights Commission's directive to the state of Jammu and Kashmir ordering compensation of rupees 2.5 lakhs and a job that has brought some respite for Nazir. But that too didn't last long. The government didn't implement the order in full, though a writ petition by Nazir culminated in a High Court order that paved the way for the release of compensation money. But he continues to move from pillar to post for a job just so he could support his family. The case is being heard by a double bench in the Jammu and Kashmir High Court. Red tapeism has left Nazir in a heart-wrenching situation.
अगर मैं किसी जगह जा सकता हूँ, मगर जब कोई 50 रुपया या 100 रुपया देगा, या उधार लेना पड़ेगा 1000 रुपया, तब मैं श्रीनगर पहुँच सकता हूँ या हंदवाड़ा पहुँच सकता हूँ। और वहाँ भी तब तक जो भी क्लर्क साहब या कोई भी हो डिस्ट्रिक्ट के ऑफिस में या किसी के ऑफिस में, जब तक उनको चाय नहीं पिलाएंगे तब तक वो काम नहीं कर सकते हैं।
Nazir is not the only person rendered disabled by the conflict. The victims range from those affected by cross-LOC shelling, crossfire, to those who become victims of landmines along the LOC. Human rights activist Khurram Parvez, who himself lost a leg in a mine blast during a field tour, has been compiling data of such victims and fighting for people like Nazir. He says that the situation is alarming.
Unfortunately, the system, the government system, is very inadequate to respond to the situation of the handicapped persons in Jammu and Kashmir. We do not have proper handicapped policy for dealing with the handicapped persons. There is quota system for reservation in the government, but there are no opportunities for the disabled people to even walk on the streets. I mean, the streets are so unfriendly to the disabled people.
While authorities continue to be callous in their attitude towards people like Nazir, who have been rendered disabled by the ongoing conflict in Jammu and Kashmir state, many such people have lost hope and faith in the system. But there are others who seek inspiration from story of Nazir, because his story is a story of grit and determination.
In 2011, the High Court ruled that the deaf in our country should be eligible to undertake a driving test. And if he passes the test, a driving license should be issued to him. But despite the order, the deaf are routinely refused a driving license, posing a huge violation to human rights.
Zorin Singha has been driving his car for the last 30 years, albeit illegally. He was born deaf and therefore was refused the permission to undertake a driving test. India is one of the few countries in the world where the deaf aren't allowed to drive, despite ample research present in the public domain that the deaf are more focused and careful drivers.
It is true that deaf persons are more focused driver because they have a heightened sense of driving, basically, because everything is visual for them, so they keep their mirrors perfectly intact. And many people have this, you have that feeling that something's going to come, so they're very careful and they have a broader vision. And along with that, if you notice, if you check in your own newspapers, not even a single case has been reported where a deaf person has been in an accident. I have been driving for the past 30 years and I've been driving illegally. I don't have any parents, I have 3 kids and I'm extremely independent, and this is from the car. I have driven to Jaipur, I've driven to Mussoorie, all on my own, and thankfully nothing's happened. I am a careful driver. I use rear view mirrors and side view mirrors, and there are thousands and thousands, actually in fact more deaf people who are not even allowed to drive because driving license diya nahi jata hai.
Last year, the High Court had ruled in favor of the deaf, allowing them to sit for driving tests. But the Archaic Motor Vehicles Act still mandated that people with disabilities should not be allowed to drive. The irony is that deaf and blind foreigners could be allowed, but not Indians.
Well, the judge said that a deaf person is as eligible as anybody else to apply for a driving license. And if a deaf person passes the test and is capable of driving, the person cannot be denied a permanent license merely on the basis of deafness. Now this follows an international trend where all across the world deaf people are permitted to drive, and it may surprise you to note that foreigners who are deaf who come to India who have an international driving license also drive in this country. So a foreigner who's deaf can drive in this country, but an Indian who's deaf cannot drive.
And shockingly and very ironically, that when foreign deaf people come to India and they have international driving license, they're allowed to drive in India. But our Indian citizens, Indian deaf citizens are not allowed. Then why is it that if I go to Sri Lanka, for instance, if I go to Sri Lanka and I get a driving license here and come here, then I'm allowed to drive? Why is this injustice?
They've been running from pillar to post trying to make the government understand that deaf persons are responsible drivers and therefore shouldn't be arbitrarily refused a license on grounds of their deafness alone.
Government, once when we received the High Court, government are very scared. They said that there's so many fatalities, and if we let the deaf people drive, we will be increasing the number of fatalities. So then what we're doing is we're pushing the government. And abhi recently, 2 days ago, we met Srimati Sheila Dikshit, and we've written to her, and she suggested us that we meet the Minister of Transport.
We have with us the State Transport Minister, Mr. Ramakant Goswami. So why is it that the deaf people in our country aren't allowed to be issued a driving license when even foreigners coming from abroad can drive in our country, even if they are deaf?
Actually, there is no provision in the Motor Vehicle Act. So we will have to see the Motor Vehicle Act, and the Motor Vehicle Act is under the central government. So we are considering sympathetically. Yesterday we met these people, and you are right, absolutely right. And I just came to know that High Court has also asked us to give the driving license to them. So we are considering.
So, but what will be the next step from the government?
Let's see. We will have to see the Motor Vehicle Act.
For far too many years, we've ignored the disabled in our country, reducing them to a life of dependence. It's a situation that's completely avoidable only if we were to empower them with the ability to commute. It now remains to be seen when the government will awaken to the cause of the disabled. To effect any change, we must as a society wake up and sensitize ourselves to the issues of the disabled. Instead of relying on charity and welfare services, we must try and integrate them into society as seamlessly as possible. Just as it's the government's responsibility, equally it's our duty to take care of our disabled. Thank you for watching.